The CARES 2 Act is coming at us. Today we're going to talk about what you need to know about this huge piece of legislation, who's going to benefit, how it's going to affect all of us, and everything else that you need to know about what's coming down the pipe. Hi, my name is Jim Hart. I'm the founding attorney here at Hawthorn Law, where we help online businesses get their legal house in order so that they can focus on what they do best, and that is building something that truly matters in the world. Today I want to share with you my thoughts on what's going on with the CARES 2 Act that is currently working its way through Congress. We're at the very preliminary stages. This is going to be another huge piece of legislation with a price tag approaching $1 trillion, and there's going to be a lot of people impacted. So let's just jump right into it. There's really two primary things that are going to be going into this legislation as far as I can tell from what I've read. And that's number one, there's going to be additional funding for the PPP loan program. I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. And number two, funding for state and local governments. And then we're going to talk a lot about that here in a second. First off, let's talk about the PPP loan funding. The $310 billion that was allocated to the PPP loan program just a few weeks ago through Stimulus 3.5 is already just about out of money. In fact, they're projecting that it's going to be out of money by the end of this week. So one of the major things that this CARES 2 Act is going to do, number one, it's going to change some things about the PPP loan program. It's going to potentially prolong the length of time that goes into the payback period. And number two, they're talking about limiting the number of employees that can work for a company that's applying for these funds, because a lot of smaller businesses have really been left out, where the larger businesses have gotten a bulk of the loan funds from this program. So they're talking about limiting the number of employees at businesses that apply to 25 or fewer. Now, I don't know if that's going to be for all of the funds or just for a portion of the funds, and we don't know how much money they're going to be allocating to this program. Again, those are some of the changes that we're hearing that are going to be happening to the PPP loan program. So additional funding, limiting the numbers of employees, and potentially prolonging the payback period for those funds. Now, we've got a whole lot more to talk about when it comes to the relief that's being sought for state and local governments. It's important to note before I get into this that this is a bipartisan request. A lot of states, Republican states, Democrat states, it doesn't matter. The states are asking for this help because they all need it. And I know some of you are probably wondering, well, do they really need the help? I mean, a lot of these states, their budgets are out of whack anyway, so maybe they don't need these funds, or maybe we're just bailing them out because of problems they had before. That's just not accurate. It's not a true statement. If you're hearing that from people, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. Tax revenue across the board for all states is going to decrease as a result of COVID-19. And we're going to see immediate losses in the near term, and we're also going to see projected losses into the future. And let me talk to you about what I mean by that. In terms of immediate losses, we're looking at things like sales taxes, sin taxes, which are revenue derived from the sale of cigarettes and alcohol, specifically at bars and restaurants, excise taxes from air travel, occupancy taxes from hotels, gas taxes. Every time you go to the pump, you pay some tax. I bet you didn't know that. And in some states where gambling is legal, we're also talking about gambling taxes. It just got really dark. See that? And then in terms of projected losses, we're looking at losses for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. And really what we're looking at here are going to be income tax losses and real estate tax losses. Because if fewer people are working, they're not paying their income taxes, and if they can't work and they can't pay their bills, they're not going to be paying their mortgages. And if they can't pay their mortgages or their rents, then their landlords or themselves personally are not going to have money available to pay real estate taxes. We could potentially see some foreclosures in the future unless the federal government steps in to do something about that. Now, during a recession, all of these revenue sources are going to dry up, but these tax revenue sources have been hit especially hard during COVID-19, and that's because nobody's traveling, nobody's flying, nobody's going to stay in hotels anywhere, nobody's taking cruises, nobody's going out to restaurants and bars, buying drinks or alcohol. People are driving less, so they're not paying as much money in gas taxes. So when you start to add all these things up, you can quickly see that for just about every single state in the country, in fact, I would say every single state in the country is going to see losses as a result of COVID-19. So what does this mean for states? It means that number one, they're going to have to do a hiring freeze because they're not going to have money in their budgets. Loud birds. Because they're not going to have money in their budgets to hire new people. Number two, you might see layoffs because if they don't have the money, the tax revenue coming in, then certain non-essential workers may in fact be let go. In addition, further complicating all this is the fact that if states don't receive help from the federal government, then they're going to be left to foot the bill for all the COVID-related expenses, including testing and medical care and things like that, that they just can't afford to pay. And I have two primary examples to really explain to you what it is that I'm talking about. Let's first take the example of universities. Now, you've got private universities that may potentially have huge endowments, and some of them actually took PPP loan funds. But you also have state-run universities in all the states that are sitting vacant right now because students are at home, they're not going to classes, they're not living in the dorms, they can't eat on campus at the campus-run restaurants. These huge infrastructures still require maintenance and upkeep and potentially tax payments and revenue and lease or mortgage payments. The expenses don't go away just because the students aren't there. Just like if you lived in your house and you decided to go take a trip somewhere for 2 months, you still have a mortgage to pay. Just because your house is empty doesn't mean you don't have expenses related to your house. And on top of this, a lot of these schools that are now basically don't have anyone there, have students that they had to issue refunds to because they're not living on campus. If they're not living on campus, they shouldn't have to pay for student housing, and if they're not using their meal plans, they shouldn't have to pay for the meal plans that are included in their tuition bill. So that's one example. Another example that's probably more pronounced is going to be the cost of medicine to help people who have contracted coronavirus. So in addition to the testing that states need and don't have the money to pay for without federal assistance, which thankfully that was included in the last relief bill. There was money allocated for testing, so that's a good thing. But there's still going to need to be more. In a lot of states, the poorest people who have no health insurance are the ones that are most at risk of contracting coronavirus. And so if they do contract coronavirus, then a portion of those people are going to have to go to the hospitals. They're going to have to go to emergency rooms, and emergency rooms cannot turn people away if they don't have health insurance. So these people could potentially end up in intensive care with huge hospital bills that some of these state-run hospitals don't have the money to pay, or don't have the money in the budget anymore because their revenue is decreased. So there's no way to pay for these people, but they still have to get the care. Anyway, needless to say, this is all a huge problem, and this is why we need CARES 2 to come down the pipeline. Right now, where it stands is the House of Representatives is working on a bill that they intend to pass in the next week or two, and they're going to send that bill to the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already said he's not going to consider it. We'll see if he's bluffing or not. I suspect that based on past experience with Mitch, that he probably will cave at some point, but he'll somehow blame it on the Democrats and say that they were holding our country hostage. That's probably what Mitch is going to do. He does that a lot. The president has already said that he's in support of this bill, so I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if, this is going to happen. Now, many of you are probably wondering, what about stimulus checks? What about additional money? There's been a lot of ideas floated out there about $2,000 a month payments, $1,200 a month payments, payments for 6 months, debit cards that include money on them that are going to be reloaded each month. And all these ideas have been floated. Personally, my opinion is that's not going to happen in this round because we need to get the money to the state and local governments to help those people. And the people that work for the state and local governments are the ones that are going to benefit from this, as well as the general public that relies on state and local governments for people like police and fire and ambulances and healthcare workers and the teachers that are teaching your kids and the people that are out there working on your roads and your infrastructure and just generally making your life better. If you'd like to hear more from me about the stimulus bill, check out my last video right here. As more information comes out about the current state of the next CARES Act and what's going to happen with it, I will definitely do additional updates. See you in the next video.